Hello, Janeites, and welcome to Austen Chat, a podcast brought to you by the Jane Austen Society of North America. I'm your host, Brecken Wood, from the Georgia region of Jasna. Listeners, if you've ever poked around a garage sale or rifled through an old attic while secretly hoping you'd find a lost Van Gogh, you're going to love today's episode. My guest is esteemed Austen scholar Janine Barchas, and her most recent research has taken her through dusty archives galore, uncovering artwork by Jane Austen's beloved sister, Cassandra. Janine Barchas holds the Chancellor's Council Centennial Chair in the Book Arts at the University of Texas at Austin, and for the past year, she has been a visiting fellow first at Clare Hall at Cambridge and then at All Souls College at Oxford. She is the author of several books on Austen, including the award-winning The Lost Books of Jane Austen, and in 2013, she was Jasna's North American Scholar. She has recently been exploring Cassandra's practice of copying popular prints of the day and its connection to Austen's work and to the larger Austen family. Excitingly, there may still be unidentified pieces of Cassandra's work out there waiting to be discovered. Welcome to the show, Janine.
Thank you, Brecken. It's really nice to be here.
Okay, to start off, we're going to play an Austen version of Would You Rather. To go along with today's art theme, would you rather take drawing lessons from Elinor Dashwood or harp lessons from Mary Crawford?
Am I to answer this?
Yes, it's you.
I was hoping you would get input from all sorts of other people who would already. But of course, okay, so I would say that it depended on whether you really wanted to learn drawing or really wanted to learn the harp. I think, musical instruments aside, which is probably very difficult, if I really wanted to learn how to draw, I would love to have Eleanor teach me.
Mm-hmm.
But if the point was to kind of meet an Austen character, I think I would rather meet the spicy Mary Crawford and assume that the conversation, while the bad harp lesson from which I would learn practically nothing, would nominally take place. So
I was wondering if you had already had some artistic background based on your interest in this research. Have you ever taken any art classes or anything?
sure, I mean, everybody's taken some art classes. I've done a little modest sketching of the sort that I would never own up to or share. Um, so I'm a very visual person, and many of my projects have taken me into art history, and
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of the area I love. Although that's not necessarily, as you know, sort of like what led me
Mm-hmm.
to Cassandra. It wasn't because I'm an art lover that I ended up, although I suppose one reaches for what one knows.
Right. So, what did make you first look into the artistic habits
I'm
of
glad
Cassandra
you
Austen?
asked. I um so I've been researching, as you said, I was in England for a year, and I've been researching the stuff you could rent in Jane Austen's time.
Mm-hmm.
The Especially luxury items. They were often rented by women, so everything from pianos to pineapples, jewelry to silverware, were kind of luxury items, things that suggested social standing, and they could be rented as well as purchased. And I ended up studying or zooming in at in a certain chapter in a certain point of the research on a shop in London in 1790s that rented prints. And one of the ad copies for the shop was lent to copy. And I thought, lent to copy? Why would you hire a print in order to copy it at home? And I thought, of course, this was the age before the photograph, and I could see why that skill in duplication is something you would want to rehearse. But I thought, okay, well, who do I know that could be an example of that for my readers? And so that's when I reached for what I know, which is the Austen family. And so I thought, okay, I remember Cassandra doing something that connected to prints. And then when you scratch one area, I'm Dutch, and so when you clean something, you've got to do the whole room. And so suddenly I thought, okay, well, there's so few works that still survive by her. I'll look at all of them and see whether they are examples of copying.
Mm-hmm.
And almost all of them turned out to be, other than the sort of, things that were family portraits,
Mm-hmm.
like the scratch of Jane that's in the National Portrait Gallery, and that's now made its way via the bad Victorian engraving onto the 10-pound note.
Mm-hmm.
Um, everything that she did seems to be, well, not everything, but a lot of things seem to be copies of popular prints that were loaned, presumably, or so. That particular shop aside, um, which, that's part of my research about the book, I suddenly ended up in this rabbit hole that was Cassandra's copyist
Mm-hmm.
work. And it turned out that all her life long she copied from popular prints, and that her family knew this and her family prized that skill. And one can well imagine in the age before the photograph or the Xerox machine to have a skill that really copies something. She was a veritable Xerox machine, human Xerox machine,
Yeah.
and she's good at
Uh-huh.
copying things.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was a skill that she clearly shared with nephews and nieces and friends and family members, and they prized those things and they saved them. And so they're sort of popping up
Mm-hmm.
in that context.
And luckily didn't burn them like Cassandra did with a bunch of Jane
No,
Austen's
but why would
letters.
you? Why would you? What burn print?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That this is about your aunt made you a picture, and so you save it,
Yeah.
or your sister made you a picture and you save it.
Mm-hmm. And so our definition of what counts as art have kind of changed a lot since Austen's time,
Yeah.
partially thanks to the romantics you've mentioned in your article. But can you talk a bit about what Cassandra was doing and then why opinions soon changed and kind of started looking down on this kind of art?
Sure, yeah, and it makes sense when you think about it. Um, so Cassandra was copying something that she would come across in a book, or I'll show. Um, Sometimes it's a magazine, sometimes it's a book, sometimes it's a loose print that also circulated. And she then copied it for a friend, for a relative, for the family are the ones who've saved it. And so this was a skill about kind of holding a mirror up to this object and being able to share it before Instagram and before Facebook. To share images is a kind of impulse that we still very much have. We just use
Mm-hmm.
different technologies to do it. And this was about lady artist having the skill or any artist really, to have the skill to copy things and to share those.
Mm-hmm.
And then and this imitative skill was very much prized. But then romanticism rears its head and prizes original genius instead of any kind of imitative skill, and begins to demote that particular skill over invention.
Mm-hmm.
And so romanticism hails invention as true art, as opposed to anything imitative, which is mere copying. And so suddenly copying begins to be kind of mere skill as opposed to art. And that totally wasn't true. I mean, in the age in which Austen and Cassandra grow up, engravers were paid significantly more than painters. So in the Shakespeare Gallery, Boydell's Shakespeare Gallery, where that I recreated in what Jane saw, the website. Boydell paid the engravers of the pictures more than he did the original artists, unless they were members of the Royal Academy. And
Mm-hmm.
so taking something, whether large or small, reducing it in size, enlarging it in size, copying it in whatever size, doing that accurately was a revered skill that, in terms of copper plate, took a lot of time and was paid accordingly. And so I think uh, in this tradition of revering plates as views of, and in Emma we have, they're looking at views of um, uh, different cities in Europe during the sort of strawberry picking scene. Those who are
Mm-hmm.
inside are with Mr. Woodhouse are looking at pictures. Those kinds of prints are revered. But then different kinds of printing techniques evolved in the early 19th century, and photography takes hold, and Romanticism has made us prize original genius, so that when it comes to the history of Cassandra's art and its reception, it just kind of has fallen by the wayside as, oh, it wasn't really, the things that survive are have been looked at under the guise of, oh, it must be an original work. And then when things haven't turned out to be original works, they've been kind of moved to the side as, oh, whoops, I guess she wasn't an artist.
Yeah.
And that isn't the
It's
case. This
silly.
was a real, yeah, totally
Sure.
silly.
Yeah. Well, as
Very.
someone with very little artistic talent, I find Cassandra's copies incredibly impressive. And we're, going to look at them together in a bit. But how old was she when she started, and what was her artistic education like?
So the earliest one that I can point to, um, uh, and notice that I didn't say survive because the family may have others.
Hmm.
But the earliest one that I point to is from the History of England. So the text that Jane Austen wrote as a kind of satire of history and history telling that is illustrated by her sister. In those in that History of England, Cassandra provides 13 images, and she is then 19 when she does that. And the last one that I can point to is she is 61.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah, from 19 to her early
It's a
60s,
lifelong pursuit.
it's a lifelong pursuit. And so, of that, only, less than a dozen am I able to point to and say, oh, definitively, here's the image she
Hmm.
did, and here's the print she copied it from. But there must be many more images. And, when we go to specific ones, you really, I'll be able to say sort of the family didn't know that this was a copy of a print.
Hmm.
And they saved it because it was a picture done by Cassandra, or a watercolor by Cassandra, or a sketch by Cassandra. And so the these things might now be looked at in a slightly different context to see, well, what else did she copy from, and why did she choose that out of
Hmm.
that book or out of that particular magazine?
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned at the beginning, there's some real treasure hunt vibes to your research, and it's very exciting.
It's
And we'll
fun.
talk some more about it in a bit. But let's talk about the images themselves. For those listening to the audio version of this episode, the images are available on the podcast episode page. And if you want to come join us on the video version, it's posted on Jasna's YouTube channel, and the link is in the show notes. But Janine, you have quite a few of Cassandra's works to tell us about, but let's go through just a few of them and you can tell us about them.
Yep. Let me share. Voila. Yes.
Yes. Hmm.
Okay. So this is the first one that I can point to. And when I say first one, I mean chronologically. This is from the 1790s. And if I'm not mistaken, the History of England is 1795.
Hmm.
No, 92. So this is 1792. So this is when Cassandra is 19 years old. Um, and uh, here you can see on the left the image as it appears as a little roundel in the fair copy manuscript that we have that's in the British Library.
Hmm.
And you can see on the right the print from called The Recruits by Henry Bunbury. He was known as a kind of second Hogarth.
Hmm.
And you can see that it's a perfect match. Notice I'm at image 2. Let's see whether we can make it. Image 1.
There you go.
Here's the other one.
Hmm.
Also by Henry Bunbury. This print, it's kind of it's sort of a set. They circulate both together and separately, and they're clearly both about army things. And here is the relief, and here is the recruits, and here is Henry V as he appears in a roundel by Cassandra. And the perfect circle was probably created by taking a coin and
Mhm.
drawing the pencil around it. And when you overlay them, which you can, neatly do, and not in this slideshow, but I do in the article, and for the research purposes, you can see that she did draw it by freehand. This is not,
Okay.
she didn't put the print underneath the manuscript and traced it. So it takes significant amount of skill as a 19-year-old.
Yeah.
And um,
Well, you mentioned another way you know that and is when it's significantly enlarged or zoomed in, right? You know, or zoom in or zoom out.
that's
There's no way
true.
you can trace that. You just have to be able
Many,
to freehand that.
yeah, that's correct. And many of her images look like facsimiles, like she could have put them against a window and traced them. They're that good. And
Mhm.
these are that good, but when you actually, as I did, go to the recruits, you realize in terms of measurements that the print is actually much larger. It's quite a large
Mhm.
print. um, uh, then the figure in the print is larger than the figure in her circle in the manuscript. And so, yeah, she had to shrink this one. So she had to have drawn it freehand.
Mhm. And weren't you also saying that maybe the images that she drew from sort of add to the satiric nature of Jane Austen's text? Can you
I
talk
think
to that a
so.
bit?
Yeah, I mean, academic sort of reception of the history of England includes um, some speculation that maybe these two characters and the other 11 kind of uh, versions of kings and queens, that they might be based on family members. Um, but here you have prints that are clearly not based on family members, and there's no kind of customization here at all.
Mhm.
But yeah, it is. These are kings and queens, and these are just ordinary blokes lifted out of prince and placed in that authoritative position. And of course, that is in keeping with the satirical tone of Jane's text. And so these two sisters are each in their own artistic realm performing the kind of same satirical function
Mhm.
and the same joke, if you will, making the ordinary extraordinary and back again, and kind of mocking a certain formalistic style of history.
And I love the idea of them like closeted together, giggling,
Going,
sketching, coming up with ideas, this
yeah,
little collaborative effort. It makes me think of, I don't, C.S. Lewis and his brother, when they were young, um, wrote kind of comic books and stories together that later maybe influenced Narnia because they were about animals and talking
I
animals.
didn't
And
know that.
yeah, in Northern Ireland, I believe, is, or I'm not sure if he's from regular Ireland or Northern Ireland, but they, as children, they were this brother duo who would write stories and illustrate them together. And
How
so
wonderful.
that's, yeah,
Yeah.
just made
And
me think of that.
absolutely. And the Brontes, of course,
Sure.
those
Yeah.
siblings.
They're tiny
Um,
books that they made, the super small ones. That's really fun.
there's some here in
Yeah.
the Harry Ransom Center in Austin.
Oh,
Uh,
awesome.
and they, yeah, but that idea of brothers and sisters and siblings collaborating must have been the case, and maybe the brothers were even in on. I mean, this is the kind of these are the kinds of prints that young men had,
Yeah, you said that.
uh,
They're kind of
and
masculine images.
yeah, and so this feels like a sibling project that involves more than even just the two of them.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Um, okay, so those are from History of England, and
History
then
of England,
did you
and
wanna
then
move on chronologically or?
yeah, chronologically, we have here now we're in 1795 or thereabouts.
Mhm.
Um, and we have two images that actually arrived last for in my hunt, if you will. So and this one is has just moved from private hands to the Jane Austen House Museum in
Mm,
Chawton.
great.
And uh, this was copied from this print.
Mm.
And the owner, the family who had preserved it, who were descendants of Charles Austen, um, did not know that this was a copy of a print. Instead, in the family, this image circulated as the sisters.
Oh.
um, the Cassandra and Jane.
Mm-hmm.
And if you then take this print by Cipriani from 1786, from which it is a direct copy, but only on that one side,
Mm-hmm.
um, you can see that there's no customization either. This is not Cassandra and Jane. These are two Italian women,
Yeah.
um, imagined or otherwise, in this particular print. And when you go back to the Cassandra's sketch, her copy, you can see in the bottom left-hand corner that it just says "un," 1795. Um, presumably June, and presumably there
Oh.
was something else in front of it because presumably this gentleman was there as well,
Huh.
um, and has probably been cropped out. And
It's like a
and
bad breakup. Get him out of
that's,
here.
that's right. Um, and I don't know why or when that occurred, or even if Cassandra did it herself, or whether that was just sort of part of the 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 traditions in the family to focus on the two sisters, and that's why that was kept. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but here's another two prints, and these are prints of the work of George Morland, a painter who Austen clearly knew about as well. Not only does she have a heroine named Morland in Northanger Abbey, right around the time that this was made, that Cassandra made her copies apparently. Um, but in Northanger Abbey, a George Morland makes a cameo appearance as well by the cottage door, which is these kinds of pictures that he was famous for.
Mm-hmm.
Though this one's called the alehouse kitchen and the alehouse door, I think. Um, but I can't show you Cassandra's images because although they were sold at Sotheby's in 1972, I believe, they are now lost. And so, this is where the hunt begins, sort of like go
Mm-hmm.
out there. And many of these images by Cassandra were mistaken for colorized prints. And so it's signed CEA, both her works, and they were sold at Sotheby's as copies by Cassandra Austen of these two prints. But
Mm-hmm.
they no longer survive. The family can't locate them anymore,
So
the
that's how good they
descendants.
are, is that
That's
people
how good
thought
they
they
are.
were prints, but they are original. So do you have advice about I would think that you could look at it and you could tell like this has artistic material like paint or pencil on it, but maybe you can't. Do you I mean, you study these things so closely to the point where you're seeing little pin marks in the corners and things like that, so you know that maybe she pinned the original on top of it or something like that or underneath
Yep.
it. Um if people were trying to look, what should they look for? But I guess a signature.
I think you should look for this one's unsigned, but you should look for this kind of signature on the bottom left, bottom right, anywhere that's CEA or
Hmm.
CE Austen. The ones that are signed, and most of them are signed in that way, and they often have a date, and they look like this one, which was also in private hands and now is with the Cottage Museum in Chawton. Um, this one it's been sunned, if you will. It's been exposed to sunlight, and so the colors have faded.
Hmm.
And so, but it was clearly colored, and so I found um, this image. Actually, a curator found it for me in an Italian museum. Um,
Hmm.
that is black and white, but it also might have circulated in color. Uh, and so maybe she's even reproducing colors on another image that I haven't found yet that
Hmm.
might have circulated. So there are all sorts of ways in which these images could have reached uh, her, and then she decided to copy them in her own way. But look how accurate that is. I mean, you're not
Hmm.
looking for somebody who's riffing on an image and making it their own. Or no, this is about somebody whose artistic powers and interests are about copying.
As
Uh,
usually for as gifts, right?
yeah,
This one that you have up on the screen now of the mother and baby, um, wasn't it a gift for her brother and sister-in-law who were going to have a baby? You
yeah, it
said.
was made in 1808. It's the date, or 1806. The date is 1806, and that is the year that um, uh, that they moved towards that Mary Austen, Frank's wife, first wife, was pregnant with her child, and the Austen women were there in Southampton
Hmm.
with Mary when she had her baby, and so. Yeah, maybe this is about sort of celebrating that.
Hmm.
But there were a lot of Austen women who had a lot of babies,
True.
and so
And
I can't know for sure, but I was just going off of the where the women were, where Cassandra was when in the year 1806 when this was made.
so that is really fascinating. Seeing the images side by side really underscores Cassandra's skill for me. Like I said, I have very little artistic skill of my own, so if anyone can copy that accurately, I think it's really incredible. Where in Austen's fiction or letters do we see mentions of the kind of art copying that Cassandra did?
Um, Good question. In Sense and Sensibility, Colonel Brandon visits and has a discussion with Elinor when they're in London, and he's the one who spies her moving towards a window. Can I read you the quote, which I have
Yes, please.
committed to memory? On Elinor's moving to the window to take more expeditiously the dimensions of a print which she was going to copy for her friend, he, Colonel Brandon, followed her to it with a look of particular meaning. So this is just a throwaway in
Yeah,
Sense and Sensibility, but it's the kind of knowing, throwaway that Austen has, yeah, so many of where you don't
adds to
notice
the
it at first.
realism. Yeah. I
That
don't think I
adds
ever
to
noticed that, and now I'm always going to notice it because you pointed it out.
it, and for me too. I didn't, you know, until I was hunting for it. I hadn't noticed it either
Well,
in
and
my
you said
reading.
she's moving towards the window because she's going to hang it up in the window to get the light through, do you think? Or just
Possibly
to get light on it so she can see
to
it
get
better,
light
maybe?
on it to see it better. She's taking the dimensions of a print to copy it. So maybe Cassandra used a grid system where she had the same dimensions on a piece of paper as the dimensions of the print, and most of her copies are in fact almost like little facsimiles because
Mm-hmm.
they are the same size. Um, or and maybe she put a grid pattern underneath it. Maybe she did kind of hold it up against a window, tape it even, or fasten it in some way to kind of create a light box, if you will, to
Mm-hmm.
be able to trace part of the print or key elements of the print. Um, I don't know how she did it, but all of those things are possible, and manuals that teach especially young people how to copy things,
Mm-hmm.
which was a thing at the time, suggest all manner of ways that you could copy a print. You could put crayon on the back and then basically trace with some sort of slightly blunt, not too sharp instrument through,
Oh, I
and
see.
then
That's,
press
yeah.
those outlines, and then move it to the side, and then go and fill it in.
Okay.
You could use a light box, i.e., a window. You could use tracing paper, but it wasn't invented yet until
Right.
after Austen's own death. So there are a myriad of ways in which you could copy things, but you
Mm-hmm.
needed skill, and
Yeah.
copying was the first phase often of training an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where young people began, and the the Brontes also copied things, and
Mm-hmm.
Cassandra clearly
Well,
copied a lot of things, but she
and
continued to do it her
sure.
whole life long.
And Austen's Juvenilia is copying many, many different writing styles and novels and all the different things that she,
Exactly.
that like you said, that's an artist in training. That's where you start.
Yeah.
And clearly Cassandra had to have a really sharp eye to execute these images that you've shown us. And so Jane Austen also mentions prints in her letters, or does she mention Cassandra's art at all?
She does. So when they move from Steventon, and they're planning the move from Steventon to Bath, reluctantly on Jane's part, um, Jane writes a letter to Cassandra. Cassandra was probably attending one of their sisters-in-law who, in their lying-ins. Um, but Cassandra's away. She writes a letter to Cassandra saying, your prints are obviously going to come with us, but did you know that our brother apparently gave us the botanical prints in such and such a room? Did you know that that was... So she discusses the fact that the things that are on the walls at Steventon are going to come with them, and mentions Cassandra's art. So I assume that from the very beginning, from Steventon forward, Cassandra's pictures, many of them were copies of prints, but still prized as pictures by her. They weren't masquerading as original work.
Mhm.
They were um, uh, images that were copied, and often she even sort of signs them with the name of the original artist, just as you would if you were engraving them and transferring them from
Mhm.
one medium to another.
But
And those things decorated their living spaces.
yeah,
And
they were valuable decorations and
yeah,
pieces of visual art in their homes,
yeah,
right? In a
and made by her, they were even more valuable, and
Mhm.
therefore passed on to other family members in the way that I think we all do when we have an artistic member of the family and we
Mhm.
frame their things and we keep them around because uh, and uh, and this is true of Eleanor's, screens and
Yeah.
in Sense and Sensibility, where you see that, um, and uh, and it's of course true of Jane Austen's own written work that was read aloud in the family, and that there was a lot of cheering each other on,
It's meant to
and a
be
lot of...
shared and enjoyed,
Yeah,
and yeah, it's part of
yeah,
was part of the Austen family. So
exactly.
what's been your most exciting discovery so far in this line of research?
Um, well, I was in England for a year, so there were lots of exciting things,
Yeah.
to be truthful. But I guess the stuff that doesn't happen in Texas is when you give a talk about Cassandra's art in this case, and you say, sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge at the end, sort of thank you for listening. And as you see, Cassandra was doing this from 19 to in her 60s. So there must be so many more examples than the 7 I've just shown you. Keep an eye out. Thank you. And then there's applause, and everybody goes their different ways. But then 2 people came up to me at the end of my talk. This was in Exeter, the Jane Austen Society there, and they said, "Excuse me, thank you for your talk. It was very nice. We think we might have 2 of what you're looking
Did
for."
your heart just go
Oh
pitter
my
patter?
God!
Oh my gosh.
It's like, what? Um, and they explained that they were descendants of Charles Austen, Jane Austen's brother,
Mhm.
and that over the couch at home, they had a couple of pictures that they had never considered copies of anything. But after my talk, they thought maybe these 2 are also copies. And you and I didn't get those 2 pictures in the
Mhm.
slideshow. But we got to the other 2, the 2, the the mother and child, and the 2 sisters, let's call them,
Mhm.
by Cipriani. Um, those images then came about when I wrote up these 2 new images, and I thought, oh gosh, this is not what I was meant to be spending my time doing. I was
Mhm.
meant to be researching stuff you could rent, and there's lots of cool research on, you know, to doing that. But now I know of 2 works by Cassandra because I did the research, and they came in to visit me at All Souls, and we had a lot of correspondence and photographs exchange, and I was able to source
Woo.
those 2 pictures by Cassandra and where they had come from. And so I wrote it up and I sent it to them, and I said, again, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, just be sure to share with the rest of your family. And the next day,
Such
I
bounty.
I had an email from someone who said, I think I have 2 more of what you're looking for.
Those
And
Brits
so
don't
that
even know what they've got in their attics.
but it means the family, prizes these things. But I guess these are the kind, like first editions that some people have. These are almost conversation stoppers, right? Sort of like, ooh, I have a picture by my great 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 aunt Cassandra, and
Right.
you say, ooh, how cool, because it is. But then But if someone says, "Oh, Cassandra, her whole life copied things," then you say, "Well, I have a picture by my great aunt Cassandra, but do you think it's a copy? And where might it be sourced from?" And suddenly you're hunting, and
Hmm.
these family members hunted right along, and it was really fun, I think, for all of us.
Yeah.
And so and hopefully the articles will animate the conversation and maybe bring more of them
Yeah.
to
Might be
light,
just the
because there
beginning.
must be more. There must
Hmm.
be more.
Yeah, and what I really like about this, just to reiterate, that there's kind of two prongs to this treasure hunt, and there's one that like American listeners probably can't help that much with, but there's one that they can. So the one, I mean, I think we need British listeners to just look through their attics and like ask their great
Absolutely.
grandmas
And
about,
look twice.
look in the
Yeah.
chest and look on those prints that you
And
overlooked on the
move
wall.
things. Look like a girl, not like a guy. Just like move things around.
Yeah, look
Yeah.
under things. Like I'm always telling
Under
my kid,
things,
under
behind things.
things.
That's right.
Yes. So probably, if you live in the US, you're probably not going to find those things. But the other prong of this treasure hunt, like you said, is finding the print sources of what Cassandra copied. So you
Yes.
found the sources of two of the faces from, or the portraits from Jane Austen's History of England, but we don't have
Someone else
sources.
did that
Oh,
before me in
oh, okay.
2008. And we
So
just
they've been
didn't really
found.
pay attention because there
Right.
was only that example. But
Mm-hmm.
now that we have many more, yeah, we should uh,
Keep
look
look.
again. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right. We now have two examples of the 13 of
Mm-hmm.
those little portraits that are definitively, because I think that those examples are definitive, um,
Mm-hmm.
of her copying prints.
So
So
if you
then,
want to look side by side, you've got your copy of the History of England, or look up the
yep.
images online, and then looking through old prints from the late 1700s,
Yes.
early 1800s, or I guess it would have to be late 1700s, right? Um, if you could find the original image, wouldn't that be fun? I kind of
Any
want to go on that.
image, yeah, any
Yeah.
image before 1792 would have been fair game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the examples that I have shown you, although they were found by somebody else, those two examples uh, suggest that near contemporary prints were being sourced, but it could have been
Mm-hmm.
pictures in books as well. But the joke there, if there is a joke, is sort of like these are ordinary blokes, and now they're kind of being elevated
To
to this,
royalty.
yeah, to the status of kings and queens.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I would look. But that means that you're looking at the whole haystack
Mm-hmm.
of popular prints for those needles.
Mm-hmm.
And since Cassandra copied out of books and out of magazines and from loose prints, it could be anything.
Mm-hmm.
And the hunt is on. I
We're gonna
hope that other people.
crowdsource this. It's
That would be
Austen Chat is
fun.
gonna find one of them. I'm so excited.
I
Yeah.
that would be terrific,
Yeah.
because it makes sense that they're there to be found. And
Mm-hmm.
the problem is when Google image is getting better. The reverse image search gets better
Oh
and
yeah.
better and better each time. But Jane Austen's images are so prominent that any version
Well,
um,
yeah. Okay.
will get you the same
Mm-hmm.
thing again. So that was not the way to find any of these.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Got to do it the
often
old-fashioned way.
the old-fashioned way. You gotta
Mm-hmm.
go through, even if you're doing it online. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, so on the topic of Jane Austen and the visual arts, this takes us a little bit off track, but I think it's just so cool. You spearheaded a project called What Jane Saw, which I think you mentioned at the beginning. It's such an amazing online resource. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So whatjanesaw.org, but you can just do what Jane saw and even my name or whatever, and you'll get it as should be your first hit. Um, is a website that creates two visual blockbusters museum blockbusters that Jane Austen must have attended. We know she attended the one in 1813. I think she attended Boydell's Shakespeare Gallery before that, in that same building as well.
Mhm.
It's just, it was a 7-minute or so walk from Cork Street, where she visited in the 1790s and visited again in May of 1813. And she saw there, at that time, the Reynolds exhibition, the Sir Joshua Reynolds retrospective, that was in the British Institution in 1813. Um, and yeah, I and a team of really cool and talented students recreated that, and professional staff members at UT recreated it online so that you can click on all the pictures that she saw and learn a little bit about them,
Mhm.
and see, walk in her footsteps, if you will. We're working on a kind of 3D version of it, as well at the Viz Lab, at UT,
Yeah, and you can just
Texas
see it
Advanced Computing Center. You,
all on the walls, and then you can walk through different doors and see which paintings would have been on the wall in which order. It's a really cool resource. And is that the
it's
one?
free and you click through. Yeah.
Yeah, where Austen said that she was looking for Mrs. Darcy and Mrs.
She
Bingley,
was
like she
looking
was
for
looking for.
Mrs. D and Mrs. B in the
Oh, okay.
galleries that day. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And she didn't find them.
Mhm.
But this allows you to see what she was looking at and what kind of sort of celebrities that Sir Joshua Reynolds painted she thought she might find
Mhm.
Mrs. D and Mrs. B among.
And
Uh,
we in a couple months we have an episode coming up with somebody. Christine Kenyon Jones talks about Byron, Lord Byron, and Jane Austen, and he attended that gallery
he
as
attended
well.
the opening. He
Uh-huh.
attended the opening gala, and so did Sarah Siddons, the famous
Yeah.
actress,
So
and
it
she
was a big
was
event.
huge,
Mhm.
huge. Royalty attended it, and yeah, and so Austen and her brother went to the gallery, and uh, it, it's an opportunity to kind of see what she saw, and the only way to recreate that experience was digitally. And
Mhm.
so, I had a great PowerPoint that I thought answered all questions. And a friend said, "Look, this should really be a website." I said,
Uh-huh.
"Oh, no, 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 you don't understand. I'm an academic. I write books. I don't do websites." And he said, "Well," he said, "you work at an institution that has 52,000 people,
It's a
and
lot of.
there might be someone there who has that skill." And
Yeah.
so, indeed, in the end, we partnered, and it turned out to be a way of reaching a completely different audience,
Mhm.
with Austen. And
Yeah.
a lot of people are interested in Jane Austen, whose interests are also digitally oriented, and
Mhm.
who use kind of tools of the future to time travel to the past. And that was the appeal of that particular project.
Right. Yeah, it's collaborative, it's interdisciplinary, it's all those big buzzwords that they love at universities. So people should definitely look at it if you're doing any kind of research around Jane Austen or visual arts or anything like that. It's a really helpful resource.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today, Janine. This has
You're
been
welcome.
wonderful. Your article on this topic is going to be published in Persuasions Online in December of 2024 of this year.
Yep.
So people can look forward to that. What's the title of the article?
The title of the article continues an article called "Cassandra and the Art of Copying," in the Jane Austen Society report just
Mm-hmm.
this past month. So that's the UK
Mm-hmm.
article, and then with those two further examples, more about Cassandra's Art of Copying will come out in Persuasions Online
Great.
in Christmas, and then I have this, the spring surprise
Oh, tell us. Yeah.
as
What are
well.
your other Austen related projects in the works?
The spring surprise is a graphic novel. Speaking of art,
Ooh. Uh-huh.
about Jane Austen. So it's a graphic biography called "The Novel Life of Jane Austen," and it'll come out in April of 2025. Illustrated by Isabel Greenberg, an award-winning artist and graphic novelist of her own.
Exciting.
And yeah, we teamed up to do something yet different again, and
Mm-hmm.
it was, these are projects it's a privilege to work on something like that, and so it's
Well,
been
and
really fun in the making.
graphic novels are so hot right now. So that's
This one will be even better.
I'm so excited. And where can listeners go to learn more about your other work? Do you have a website or
I do
something?
not have a website, to my
Okay.
shame.
Yeah.
I am keeping the next project all to myself until it's ready to be launched. But the
Okay.
What Jane Saw project is the one you can go to, and of course you can go to Amazon and see all the books that I have on offer.
Well, thank you so much, Janine. This has been a fascinating discussion.
It's been really fun. Thank you.
Okay, listeners, fall is a busy time of year, so we have a few Jasna news shorts and reminders for you this month. First up, the winners of the 2024 Jasna Essay Contest have been selected, and we're delighted to share their outstanding work with the world. We asked students to debate the question, are Jane Austen's novels still relevant after 200 years? And we received more than 500 entries from high school, college, and grad school students in the US, Canada, and 34 other countries, making this the biggest response ever. For more on the contest results and a link to the published essays, go to our announcement in the Jasna Post news blog on our homepage, www.jasna.org. Attention all teachers, librarians, and reading program leaders working with students in grades K through 12. There's still time to apply for a free Jane Austen book box to use in a class or reading program of your own design in the US or Canada. We're currently accepting applications for the 2024-2025 school year and for 2025 summer programs. Book boxes are awarded on a first come, first served basis until our program funding is gone, so the sooner you apply, the better. For more information, an application form, and a little inspiration from past recipients, visit the program's webpage at jasna.org/programs/JA bookbox. If you didn't register for the 2024 AGM in Cleveland, but you'd like to attend virtually, it's not too late to sign up for the live stream/virtual option. As a virtual attendee, you can watch all 5 plenary speakers live: Amanda Vickery, Peter Saber, Patricia Matthew, Thomas Keemer, and Susan Allen Ford. You'll also have access to 10 breakout sessions, 5 live and 5 recorded, and Friday evening special session featuring fashion historian and previous podcast guest Hilary Davidson. And you'll have 60 days after the AGM to watch recordings of all these presentations. The live stream registration deadline is October 11th. Some spaces remain for in-person attendance as well. For more information and to register, visit the AGM website at jasna.org/Cleveland2024. And as a last reminder, Jasna has started celebrating Jane Austen's 250th birthday next year a little early by offering free student memberships now through December 31st, 2025. To sign up, visit our membership page at jasna.org/join. Now it's time for In Her Own Words, a segment where listeners share a favorite Austen quote or two.
Hello, it's Betsy Groban, proud member of the Massachusetts chapter of Jasna. I couldn't pick just one, so here are 2 of my favorite contrasting Austen quotes. Don't worry, they're short. The first is from Northanger Abbey when Catherine Morland's neighbor, the good-humored Mrs. Allen, invites Catherine to accompany her and her husband to Bath. Mrs. Allen is aware that if adventures will not befall a young lady in her own village, she must seek them abroad. The second quote, expressing an opposing viewpoint, is from Emma when the unlikable Mrs. Elton declares, there's nothing like staying at home for real comfort. I love these 2 quotes because they demonstrate once again the multitudes that Austen's novels contain, the stark differences in her meticulously drawn characters, brilliantly revealed through their choices and their lives.